Well, hello and good morning, everybody. How are we doing? It is time for, well, this is definitely one of my favorite webinars. Obviously, a little bit of a geek, I'm going to admit, but you ever tell a geek we got a simple bunch of hardware recommendations? Oh, come on, there's nothing as fun as that. So it's been a lot of fun preparing for this, especially maybe from my perspective, because I just get to chime in with, "Oh, I always liked this thing." Brian did all the heavy lifting for sure on this, but we got a really good list of recommendations just in time for you to write your little letter to Santa. So it's going to be pretty cool. I got a couple of housekeeping items for you. I want to point out that Q and A button at the bottom of your screen. It stands for questions and answers. But notice if you click it right now, you can get that situated on your screen, and that'll make it a little quicker for you to type in a question. We want that interaction. This is live. We're here. But note, you're going to be able to see the answers that I type to other people's questions. So it's going to make a great companion. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions because we are going to be going over some technical things here. So, feel free to, get ready to say, what the heck is DDR5 RAM? Because that's actually a good question. Um, Lastly, this is being recorded, of course. So like all of our webinars, you don't have to be too careful to write down everything as we say it. You'll be able to grab this on the website later today, in fact. So that's all my yibber yabber. I'm going to let Brian take us away.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you everybody for attending. This is our hardware recommendations, as Chair said, and hopefully I'll be presenting this in a way that's digestible and usable. This is my ugly mug. I have been breaking things in computers since the 80s, so I'm an old guy. And I'm going to roll right into it because we got a lot to go over. So a quick review of what we're going to be going over today. We're going to go over AutoCAD and then how Land Effects interacts with it and the parts of Land Effects. We're going to put all the parts of Land Effects, the plugin, together so you know how it all works together, and then move on to the pieces of a computer so you have a better understanding of what all that stuff inside that case actually does. And then we'll touch on the system requirements, what you need to actually run the Land Effects software. We'll talk about how we're set up in our office, and then we'll move on to specific recommendations of equipment. So for desktops and laptops and monitors and peripherals, we'll go on to networking, a little bit of quality of life stuff, and then of course we'll wrap up on backups. So let's go right into it. All right, so AutoCAD. FXCAD and AutoCAD for our purposes today are the same program. FXCAD is essentially just AutoCAD for what we're going to talk about today. Land Effects is a plugin for AutoCAD. So the application really running on your computer that you're going to see is AutoCAD. Now, Land Effects is compatible with the latest 5 versions of AutoCAD, AutoCAD Civil 3D, and of course FXCAD. So that's 2016 to 2021. There's a few versions we're not compatible with. That's going to be AutoCAD LT, which is light. It specifically does not allow plugins, and Land Effects is a plugin. There's AutoCAD 360, which is a online version, and we need to actually have an application running on your computer for the Land Effects plugin to connect to. And then there's AutoCAD for Mac, which is not actually AutoCAD, but we won't get into that today. But more importantly, Land Effects is written for Windows, so maybe it's not compatible with that either. So here is the Land Effects that you know and love and see every day. These are the buttons that you see, but there's a lot going on in the background. So this is it plugged into AutoCAD. In this case, I've got FXCAD showing. So the 3 pieces in the background are the Land Effects folder, the database, and then the plugin itself. So we'll start off with the Land Effects folder. This is probably the next thing you're going to be most familiar with because there's going to be a Land Effects folder somewhere that houses all of your custom data. So you get A lot of the stuff comes from our cloud of, blocks and hatches and whatnot, but sometimes you create your own. You have your own favorite palm tree that you want to use. That's great. So that gets saved in the land effects folder along with your custom details, and it's got your backups. So always remember your backups are in your land effects folder, and it's got your database of your local data. Now, for the land effects folder to function for its needs, it actually only needs two specific files. The rest of it is all just custom data. There's an install.xml, and that houses several different parameters that when you press a button in land effects, it checks to see what am I? It's, am I cloud? Am I local? Am I a single user? Am I multi-user? Who are my friends? What company am I? What company database am I looking at? And then there's the landeffects.vlx. And this is essentially the code of the software. This is the millions of lines of code that Jer's written over the years, all wrapped into one little tiny file. And then one thing you should be aware of is we've renamed the setup for new workstations. It's now called Setup FX Workstation. We think that's a lot more user-friendly, and that should be living in your land effects folder as well. Now, this land effects folder can be either maybe local on your hard drive, like we see here, it's on a local disk, or it may be on a server, or it may be on a shared online folder like a Dropbox or Google File Stream, something like that. The next piece is the database. Now, the database is something you're not really going to see. It houses your preferences, your land effects project files, and your templates, and also has the data tied to the smart blocks that make them smart. So when you click on it, you make a label, it knows it's a hydrangea. A quick aside about databases, we've got three different types that we use. There's the cloud, which I think everybody's familiar with, essentially somebody else's server holding all of your stuff for you. There's SQLite, which is a single user local database. The light implies it's a very small database that is super efficient for single users. So we added that in relatively recently. And then MySQL, this is the big one for usually on a server and usually for many users that want to be working on a local database. The last piece is the workstation. This is the plugin. This is what connects your AutoCAD over to your land effects folder and your database. It needs to be run from the land effects folder in general. That way it knows where its home is. If you're going to reinstall something, it's almost always going to be this, is generally the thing that needs to be unplugged and replugged in. Doesn't hurt anything. You're not going to lose any data. Nothing's going to get broken by it. It's just like unplugging and plugging in, a fan or something. And this is what adds your land effects menus to your AutoCAD. So if we want to put all of that together, we've got your AutoCAD or FX CAD, and that's plugged in via the FX Workstation plugin that connects to your land effects folder that has all of your custom data, and it has your database if you're on local data, or it lets it know that it needs to go out to the cloud for your data if you're on cloud data. So then we need to talk about computers. So what is a, what makes up that box that sits in front of you? There's basically four major pieces that you'll want to know about. There's the CPU, the brain of the computer. So when you tell your computer you want it to do something, the CPU sends that message over to the SSD. We're not going to be talking about hard drives or hard disk drives, or I'm going to try not to. I'm old and I use hard drive interchangeably with long-term storage, such as an SSD. But the CPU sends a message over to the long-term storage, an SSD, to grab your data, and then it sends that over to the RAM, which is your current working thinking memory. So the SSD is like your long-term memory, and your RAM is like your working memory, what you're thinking about right at this moment. The RAM then sends it over to the GPU. This is a second brain that your computer uses just for processing the graphics. So it offloads some of what the CPU would need to do to a second brain, essentially, to then compile that and send that off to your monitor so you get to see your minigun T-Rex. So we'll start with the CPU. The CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. And like I said, it's the brain of the computer. There's a few things that you need to know about a CPU when you're going to go purchase one. The first things is Xenon. You may see workstations that come with a Xenon processor and gets touted for all of its abilities. The truth is that for a CAD workstation, Xenon isn't usually worth the cost. You can get a standard processor that's designed to be overclocked, which is essentially they push extra power through it, and at the cost of extra heat, get more speed out of it. And price per dollar, Xenon is just really not worth it for what we're going to be doing as a CAD designer. Uh, the number of cores. So a CPU actually can only do one thing at a time, interestingly enough. So it does it extraordinarily fast. So it appears as though your computer is doing multiple things simultaneously. But in truth, the CPU is only doing one process at a time and then moving on to the next one. So what engineers have done to try and get more processing power into less space is they've actually had the ability to stack multiple CPUs in a single chip. So that's where your number of cores is actually how many CPUs is in your CPU. So you get more bang for your space and buck. So for our purposes, 4 is usually going to be plenty. Unless you're going to be running multiple applications simultaneously, and I'm talking a lot, you're really not going to take advantage of having more cores. And so there's not a lot of reason to spend extra money on it. So the next thing is the speed of your processor. This is measured in gigahertz, and I'm not going to geek out on what that means because it's just nerd stuff. But at the end of the day, what you need to know is that GHz represents how fast is your processor. So generally you're looking for 3 or more. And then cache size is extra memory that's on the CPU itself, as opposed to the long-term storage or the RAM. This is super fast to access. So more of this is better, but generally gets dictated by the other 3 parameters. So if you've fallen into the others, then cache size kind of gets set aside. And as an example, I wanted to show, here is on the left-hand side, the CPU being monitored and then firing a size pipe command, and you can see how much the CPU is being taxed. You can see there's a 32% increase. But mind you, I'm running this in a virtual machine and it's severely limited in what it has for processing power. And even with one of the most complicated commands you can run in Land Effects, it's really barely ticking the CPU over. So you can see that it's not as critical as other things may be. Next thing is your RAM. Random access memory, which is a weird name for something that's really your short-term thinking memory and you want to keep it organized in your brain, but that's how computers work. Used to be when people ask me, how do I make my computer faster? I could generally, this is probably about 15 years ago, look at it and go, yeah, you need more RAM. RAM's cheap. At this point, if you're getting a desktop, you're usually going to want to get the least possible RAM and then upgrade it after the fact because it's almost always cheaper than purchasing it from the original seller. On a laptop, on the other hand, you're generally going to want to get what you need because laptops are A, difficult to upgrade on a good day, or B, you just can't upgrade it at all. Now, I wanted to show that you can actually look and see what your current computer is doing when you're using Land Effects. You just right click on the taskbar, go to Task Manager, and you can see here I've I've really cranked it real hard, but you can see Chrome, I've got 85 tabs open, I think here, and it's starting to hog up a lot of space. And then AutoCAD, I've got a bunch of drawings open, as you can see from the tabs, and it's not using that much. So you can get away with actually significantly less than a lot of manufacturers would have you think. So GPU is our graphical processing unit. This is a confusing mess. There's no way around it. The naming conventions get all messed up. The different statistics are difficult to interpret. So basically, I want to narrow it down to there's 2 things you need to know. How much memory does the card have, and what kind of output does it have? So there's a sweet spot for AutoCAD and land effects, and it's usually between 4 GB and 8 GB of, of memory on your GPU. So that's generally the sweet spot. 4 to 6 is usually good for most users with 1 or 2 monitors. 8 gigs is when you're getting into having two or three 4K or more monitors, and then there's honestly not much reason to go past 8. You're getting diminishing returns for your dollar. And the other thing, besides knowing how much memory is on your card, is what kind of output do you need? And this is going to roll into your display, which is going to have an input. So you'll want to know, do I have DisplayPort? Do I have HDMI? Do I have the new USB-C? And that may dictate some of your decision making. So I touched on this earlier, the solid state drive. For a workstation, there's no reason to be running an old hard disk drive or even a hybrid drive anymore. SSDs have come down so much in price that it's almost impractical to use one. With the new NVMe, which is something you may forget, it's easy to forget. It's this smaller version of an SSD at the very bottom here that looks like its own kind of chip, and it actually plugs directly into your motherboard itself. And you can see on the left the traditional SSD with a SATA, where it plugs in like an old hard drive would with cords. The NVMe is even faster. It is amazing the difference you get between a hard drive and an SSD. It is the difference between having a record player where you have to move the stylus to pick the song that is almost identical to what a hard drive does compared to a solid state drive, which is like an old Nintendo cartridge. You slap it in the machine and it is instantly working. There's no delay or very little. So when we're talking about SSDs, how much space do you need? Really, 512 gigabytes to 1 terabyte is probably the sweet spot. You usually don't want less than 512. 256 is the next step down, tends to fill up real quick. 512 is actually a good amount. It's pretty rare you're going to want to go above 2 terabytes. The price point for 2 terabytes or for more than 2 terabytes is starting to get pricey again. And the use case for it is very small. It's generally a laptop because you can't typically upgrade it. And then the question becomes, why are you storing that much data local on your computer when you can offload that onto a cloud? And then here's the next thing is display. So displays have some of the more confusing terminologies with them, with numbers and letters and different verbiage. We can boil it down to some simpler stuff. So 1080p or HD is the standard that we're used to. 2K you may hear about, it's a little less well known. It's a slightly higher resolution than HD. So generally 2K is not all that different, so not worth paying much extra for. 4K is really the next jump up, and it makes a huge difference. The other one you may see is UHD, which is slightly less than 4K. It's generally, you'll see it more often in laptops because of form factor. Now, laptop is a place where, or sorry, the display is a place where you're going to be spending some hard-earned money, and for good reason. Foremost is your eyes. I have a 5K display I'm using right now. I've actually got it downscaled to a little above 2K. And you may ask me, well, why did you get such a big, expensive display if you're going to just then scale it back down? And I have old eyes, and so I need bigger letters. But I don't need as big of letters because the lines are so crisp, I can read smaller letters and it's easy on my eyes. And the other reason is that a monitor is usually going to outlast a workstation. So if you get two 4K monitors today, and you buy a workstation today, that workstation will usually say it'll last 3 to 5 years, depending on if it's a laptop or a desktop and its usage. Whereas the monitors will typically last twice as long. So you get 6 to 10 years out of those monitors. Also, if you get a couple of monitors, then if one of them fails, you're not hard down. You've got a backup. Speaking of backups, backup storage. I always say this, not having backups is like riding a motorcycle without a helmet. Absolutely, you can do it. I see it all the time, and it's fine until it's not fine. Um, we love our little Samsung T5 2 TB external SSD. It fits in your back pocket. It is awesome. It's super fast to back things up with. And in general, the land effects folder, 2 TB is way more than you're going to need for that. We're looking at more like 5 GB, which is 1% roughly of that. So you can also back up your drawings, all of your working drawings onto just this little pocket-sized buddy here. And the other thing is cloud. Cloud storage, unlimited cloud storage, is going to run you somewhere between $10 and $20 a month. So for less than the cost of one of these external drives, you can have the safety and knowledge that all of your data is stored in the cloud on other servers, usually replicated across the world. And so should anything happen to your local geographic area, you're fine. All of your data is safe. All you need is a new computer and an internet connection, and you can go right back to work. So system requirements. So because Land Effects is a plugin for AutoCAD, generally speaking, the AutoCAD system requirements are all you're going to need. There are a couple of specific areas where we think that the system requirements for Land Effects are a little bit different, and I'm going to point those out now. Specifically, the GPU, AutoCAD suggests a minimum of 1 GB, and we say that 2 GB is really where you want to start. 2 is the minimum to have an experience that will be enjoyable. Can you run it on less? Yes, absolutely. I have a Surface Pro. I can run AutoCAD on my Surface Pro. It doesn't even have a GPU. Um, I wouldn't want to draft on it though. So that's something to take into consideration. The other thing is the disk space. So for AutoCAD, that 7 GB of disk space that's required, that's on the workstation itself. Whereas with Land Effects, because it's a plugin for AutoCAD, the plugin itself that connects your workstation to the Land Effects folder is very small. So the Land Effects folder actually houses most of the disk space that you're going to need. And that won't necessarily be on your workstation. Frequently, it's going to be on a server or maybe cloud-based or on a NAS. So something to take into consideration is you actually don't need that much more space than AutoCAD on the workstation itself. Also, again, workstations should be running SSDs. So I get this question all the time. What kind of computer should I buy? Where do I start? There's a billion different choices. And generally I tell people a gaming computer. They're not just for games. So what a gaming computer does is exactly what an AutoCAD workstation needs to do. It needs to take complicated graphics and push them out to a high resolution display very fast and over again. And so they basically fulfill the same function, even though they are marketed in very different ways. So a gaming computer is going to have all high-end parts. It's going to have a powerful discrete graphics card, GPU. Even a low to medium tier gaming rig is going to be able to run AutoCAD. It doesn't require building or double checking component compatibility with each other. And generally, it's a better price. There's downsides to it, sure. Flashy lights. Uh, I have one of these, not this specific model, but I have electrical tape I put over some of the flashy lights that hurt my eyes. And I poked little holes in them so I can actually see the indicator lights, and I moved on with life. And I saved a bunch of money by doing it. You still have to check the specifications. All the equipment should work with each other, but unfortunately, not all sellers are as honest, and they will throw a gaming tag on a computer that really isn't up to snuff, but they want you to pay for it anyway. And then typically they come with Windows Home, but we'll talk about that more in a little bit. The other question I get often is Mac versus PC. And this one, it really boils down to personal preference. What do you like? What are you comfortable with? What do you want to work in? When I was pricing these out, the iMac is actually close in its price to a Windows, comparably. You do have to factor in that it's coming with a 5K 27-inch monitor. So once you've factored that in, they're roughly the same price. We'll talk about the laptop a little later. Um, with a Mac, you could run Parallels, and you can run Windows inside of your Mac with coherence mode. You don't even have to know what's running there. It can just be off in the background. If you hate Windows and you never want to see it again, you don't have to. It can just be in the background, and you can run coherence mode, and AutoCAD looks like it's running native in your Mac. So, said we talk about Windows 10 versus Pro. Windows 10 Home is generally going to be good enough for offices of 5 users or less. You get over 5 users and you start wanting to use Active Directory and group policies to make rules for different computers and users. You may want to take advantage of Azure integration, which is their web integration, and all of those features require Windows Pro. Now, the nice news is that you can buy Pro for $200 and install it on a gaming computer, and it's often still cheaper than buying a CAD workstation. And when I was pricing these out, what I was finding was that frequently I had the option to choose Pro during the purchase process. Let's talk about how we're set up. I just said I have a 5K monitor in front of me. Actually, all of our users are either on a iMac or a MacBook Pro. Generally, we have 1 to 2 external monitors, and we're all sharing together using Google File Stream. That gets backed up to a Mac Mini server that has Time Machine running on it, and then that gets backed up to an IO safe, which is fire and flood and whatnot proof. And then we also, we love our little T5. We back up onto the little external T5s and have those off-site, so that we make sure that, should something unfortunate happen in the geographic area, we've got something in another location. And now we've gotten through all the technical stuff, and thank you for sticking that out with me. So let's start off with this entry-level MSI Trident. It's $1,000, and this is going to take care of most of your needs. You can run a couple of HD monitors or one big 4K monitor with this setup, and it's going to take care of most of what our users will need. We talked about CAD workstations. So I actually found a CAD workstation, and I was able to configure it in a way that I was happy with, and actually would be willing to suggest. It is nicely set up for generally 1 to 2 monitors. The thing is during my research, I found that a similarly set up Dell workstation with a Xenon processor was roughly $1,000 more. And that was at the cost of some of the other components. So just as a side note about if you want to buy a CAD workstation, you really have to be careful about the equipment, the components and equipment you're purchasing. They tend to, I'll just say it, they tend to price gouge. So here's the Dell entry-level G5 gaming computer. And for somewhat similar price point, a little bit more expensive, you get double the hard drive space, double the GPU. This is a perfect example of how a CAD workstation and a gaming computer may have very similar equipment, but they will price the workstation higher because they figure they can get away with it. And then, of course, the iMac. Running everything I do today on one. Works great for our needs and should for your needs as well. During the purchase process, please be aware that you will need both Windows 10 and Parallels Pro. So you got to add $300 to the price point that you purchase your iMac at. As well, the way I've got this one spec'd out, you're probably going to want to buy some more RAM for it. 8 is a little low, would like to see 16. And since it's inexpensive and there's a couple slots in the back of your iMac that's perfectly easy to throw these in. For $65, you get triple the RAM. I think money well spent. The other thing you may want to do is get yourself a USB-C to DisplayPort cable. Found this one on Mac's website, so it's officially approved. And then you don't have to, well, we'll talk about monitors in a moment. But you may want to take advantage of external monitors that aren't necessarily approved by Mac. So let's move on to our laptops. So previously I showed you an entry-level MSI desktop, and this would be the MSI's laptop version. So we're paying $500 more for a laptop here, and let's look at the specs. Okay, so you get a 15-inch HD monitor with it that you don't get with the desktops. That's something to factor in that $500. You get a slightly slower processor and a little bit more, about double the hard drive space. So what we're really talking about here is if you're purchasing a laptop, you're paying extra for portability. So really, laptops are for people who know that they are going to be out and about and needing to be able to design or present on the go. Otherwise, you're paying extra for unnecessarily. So we go on to that Dell G5 that we showed earlier. Here is the laptop, essentially version. Spec'd out this way, this would be great as I don't leave the office all that frequently with my laptop, but when I do, I need to be able to present or work off-site. And it's a little bit heavier, but it's going to be able to push out to multiple external monitors. It's a great choice for, I need to be mobile, but not every day. And then I wanted to touch on those users who actually are almost all the time on their laptop. They use that built-in monitor. And so we've got this Dell XPS, which has a 4K monitor in it. So it's easy on the eyes. If you're going to be using that laptop display as your main display, you want to save your eyes, particularly since it's a smaller display. So going up to 4K, that's absolutely worth it there. And then here's our MacBook Pro. A lot of our employees here are using these. It is a great choice for a Mac because it's the only laptop choice for a Mac. But it's actually, it's a great machine. Does everything our designers need. I think all of our designers are on laptops at this point, if I remember correctly. Essentially this laptop. Again, be aware that you'll need to spend an extra $300 on Windows and Parallels to run land effects on a Mac. And you may particularly want to have the ability to push out to an external display, again, with the USB-C to DisplayPort cable adapter. Now, speaking of external displays, that 5K monitor I was talking about is this LG Ultrafine 27-inch. We do not recommend it. It is Mac compatible. That is the only advantage it has, is being natively Mac compatible. I priced out I was looking for a similarly priced, but it ended up I couldn't even find something similarly priced. I actually had to go $300 cheaper for a 7-inch larger monitor that was 5K. So as you can see, it's really own advantages being Mac compatible. So stepping down from 5K monitors into the 4K realm, which is really probably the more reasonably priced realm from what I've found. They've come a long way, as this LG 27-inch 4K monitor. Coming in at $400, you can get a couple of these. And then, like I said earlier, is that, the advantage of having a couple of these is that if one of them goes down for some reason, you are not hard down. You can keep on working. If you generally like to have a single larger screen to actually design on, this Dell 32-inch is a good choice for that. As you can see, as you go up in size, the price goes up a little disproportionately. But if you're big on having that one big monitor that you can really design on, you can take advantage of this. And then we move on to really big, the LG 49-inch curved ultra wide. This thing's beautiful. There's no way around it. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's priced accordingly. You can actually hook multiple computers up to it because it's so big. And you can split up your screen however you like. If you like designing, on as much real estate as possible, you go with this or maybe a large TV. The downside to this is definitely it is a bit pricey. And um, if this fails, then you're hard down because generally you're not going to be able to fit another monitor with this behemoth. But on the other hand, it's amazing. So moving on to our peripherals. Our peripherals actually haven't changed that much. The Logitech MX Master is still uh, a great mouse at a great price. Few of us are also using Mac Magic Trackpad. I got a chance to play with these for a couple of days, and it is actually, I really enjoyed it. They're actually really intuitive and an enjoyable experience, which I wasn't expecting. So I can personally say, yeah, these are great. Um, I have wrist and elbow issues from being on a computer all day and just, life. So I've switched over to using a vertical mouse. The Evolent vertical mouse is my choice. I went through a bunch of different ergonomic shapes and mice, and this one ticks all the boxes. It changes DPI really fast. It has multiple programmable buttons. It does everything you could want to do. It is a little weird to start with, and you do have to get used to it though. And then on the lines of ergonomics and quality of life, the Microsoft Sculpt keyboard. Um, I tested out probably about a half dozen different ergonomic keyboards, split keyboards, trying to get something that was going to take care of wrist and elbow issues with not working in an ergonomic way. And of all of the ones I tested, the $70 one beat out the $250 fancy ones. So still a great keyboard, particularly at that price. So a lot of us are still working from home. All of us over here at LandEffects still are. So your home router and gonna really come into play here. So the TP-Link Archer AX50, great gigabit router, fast, good range on it, nice entry level. It's gonna take care of you. And then our upgraded pick would be the Netgear Orbi Wi-Fi mesh system. Jer is in love with this thing. The price point is significantly higher, but you have to factor in that you're getting a cable modem with it. So that actually brings the relativistic price down. And I have to say it, hardwire your computer in, whether it's a laptop or a desktop, hardwired in. $20 gets you 100 foot of Cat6 cable. And you order it to the exact length that you need and you're good to go. I actually had a customer the other day. They were saying that they could only design during certain times of the day because of kids and pets running around the house. They couldn't run the cord that was running through the house. And I told them, hey, let me send you this. $4 for 100 cable clips. Just tack it around the edge of the wall so that nobody's stepping on it or kicking it or yanking it. $4 saves you so much heartache. PoE is also something we should touch on here. This is a little more for offices. PoE is power over Ethernet. So what this does is it makes that data cord also a power plug. So amazing technology. We use them at the office for our phones and our cameras. They can be used for wireless access points. I actually have a desk phone that has one of these little PoE injectors plugged into it. So it actually grabs the power and runs it to it. If you're going to be going with PoE, please be mindful of purchasing more ports than you have employees. So if you have 4 employees, don't buy the 4-port PoE switch because as soon as you add 1 employee, you're going to need another port or they don't get a phone. So be mindful of that. And this is quality of life. Um, Several of us at the office have uplift desks, one push of a button, and it switches from standing to sitting to anywhere in between. We've all been working from home, and I decided, you know what, it's worth it to go ahead and do it myself. So I went ahead and purchased one of the Jarvis leg systems. It's just the legs. And I took the top off of an old desk and threw it onto that. And you may be able to hear when I push the button. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but that is the sound of the desk automatically adjusting itself. It's quick,
Yeah, that
it's
sounds
easy,
awesome. That's cool.
and it has made a huge difference in my life. I've had it for, oh, I'd say maybe a month now, and my back hurts less. My wrists and elbows hurt less because I'm able to move. I'm able to stand up every once in a while, get the blood flowing again. So quality of life, and just totally worth it in my book. Right. Network attached storage and cloud. So you have all these cool pieces of equipment, but your data, where is it? Well, for offices of roughly 25 or less employees, a NAS is going to be sufficient, network attached storage. So this little box that plugs into your internet and your network, and you can store all of your data for all of your users on there. This Synology DS218J, it's a mouthful, comes in at $170, and that is driveless. So then you get to decide how much data do you need to store. Generally, you're going to want to mirror the drives. It has two drive slots. So if you need 10 terabytes of data, then you need two 10 terabyte drives. So that if one of them fails, the other one has all of your data, you yank the broken one out, you throw a new one in, you move on with life. Um, the cool thing about this is it's already set up so that it can be synced with Dropbox or other cloud services like Amazon Drive. Super awesome to really just have it automatically syncing to the cloud for you. Um, and then if you want the upgraded version, this thing's slick. It's the QNAP TS253D 4G, another mouthful. But if you look at the read write speed, it's nearly triple. It's amazingly fast. Also has the capability to natively store up into the cloud. And I thought this was super slick. Um, it actually has the ability to run a virtual Windows machine on the NAS itself. So if you wanted to do a local database with just this little NAS instead of having a whole server, you could totally do it. Super slick. And of course, don't forget about that offline storage, that offsite offline storage, little Samsung T5 2 terabyte SSD. Just throw it in your back pocket and walk away with all the safety and security in the world. So having those backups, what kind of backups do we need? How are we going to do it? The 3-2-1 rule. So we want 3 copies of your data. So 1 copy is going to be in production at all times. So really you need 2 copies other than your production copy of your data. Of those 3 copies, we want them in 2 different formats. So we want, typically, one is going to be on a solid state drive or a hard drive, and another is going to be in a cloud service, and then we'll have one of those repeated for the third format. And then one of those needs to be remote. So in case of fire or flood or ransomware, we want one of them offline and offsite. So if you have your production one at your office, then you have your little Samsung 2 terabyte in your back pocket that goes home with you, so you know it's offsite. And then you've got your cloud storage for all of that. So just in case. And then having backups isn't enough. You have to test them. Unfortunately, having backups is not that awesome if you need to use it and then it turns out that those backups didn't work. So once a year, you do a fire drill. You shave off half a day, you call your IT, and you do a stress test. You turn off your internet so that you replicate having inaccessible shared online folder, and you restore from that point. Um, you disconnect your server from the network, and you restore from that point. So like as if your server crashed. And then you restore from an offline backup, as if you had ransomware attack your server and your local computer. So you grab your one from the house, you bring it in, and you make sure you can restore from that as well. Oh, and our chair pick of the year, the Clevens Scorpion chair. At a reasonable $3,300, it is the best chair of 2020. It is fully adjustable, zero-G chair. You can go from seated all the way to an inverted or horizontal position. Everything is electronically adjustable. It can have up to 5 monitors, and you don't need a separate desk because the keyboard tray and mouse trays are equipped in and good for lefties and righties, we think it's an awesome choice. And if anybody does end up buying one of these, we'd love to see your pictures of it. So I think that just about wraps it up for me. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, yeah. Come on, everybody. Let's get in some questions. We had some great ones I was able to answer. Definitely stressing SSDs and stressing those offline backups. We have had a couple that I know. You might know how many. I just know definitely one for sure. I thought it was two or three, but of our Land Effects users who were hit by ransomware, and it is a thing. So just really need to consider that an employee could get an email. We've received one recently. It said it was from UPS. It said your package was delayed, and please click this link to arrange alternate shipping. If you click that link, it would then go over your network and encrypt everything on all computers. So anything that's plugged in. So your ransomware protection, you really do need offline complete backup. So you really want to work that in to your backup strategy. Because looking forward, if you say, oh, I have everything in Dropbox, so I have all my offline storage, right? Well, who's to say that ransomware won't possibly impact your Dropbox account as well? So obviously, you need to work that in. That what happens if Dropbox goes completely down? Do you have a backup to everything on Dropbox? That's going to be a very scary situation when suddenly your Dropbox is completely empty, and you're frantically calling Dropbox and trying to find out what happened, and things like that. So you want to account for those sorts of things. um and also on the SSD, had a question on that Samsung T5. Yes, it's a little pricier than even their Samsung T3, but it is the speed of it, which is just incredible. And so, for that $250 thing that is going to last forever, I don't know when you would ever not want 2 terabytes that can fit in your back pocket. It's just an incredible piece of hardware that you can just keep with you, and then when you do get something else, well, that 2 terabytes of data can just go live in your safety deposit box at the bank, and just know that's one more great backup layer that could be literally an asteroid could hit your town, or an earthquake. You're here in California. That's literally part of our plan, is for your offline backup, we have to be prepared for an earthquake. So an earthquake is may very well take out your offline backup because it's in the same town. So your offline backup needs to be very safe. Do you have, Brian, any other thoughts on because Jeff just chimed in with a question on any other recommendations for offline storage?
Unfortunately, most offline storage is going to be somewhat geographically locked because, you know, in general, it's you take the backup from the office and you go to your house. Well, if your local area has, a geographical issue, a fire, a flood, hurricane, then that's not as feasible. There are some services that will do an offline backup. They're a little more obscure. I wasn't looking into them as much. One of the things you can do is you can actually take a drive and drive it to another safety deposit box, for, let's say you have a Chase Bank account, and you can drive it down, you know 250, 300 miles away. um, that's a once a year kind of thing, obviously. um,
Exactly. I've done that before too. That was a little routine that I used to do, is every year I would make a backup of everything, and then I would mail that to my dad. And so I'm
yeah,
like, there we
that's a good
go.
option.
It's 300 miles away. So just you want to you want to go through it. But obviously we will have yet another webinar on all of our backup solutions, but it just definitely very much intersects with the hardware recommendations. So, well, gee, I do hope you all like what you saw. I hope you got your letter to Santa going for that scorpion chair. You know, please, 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 Santa. I need two scorpion chairs side by side. So yeah, that's what I need right now. But, feel free to fire us any questions and all that. And otherwise, have a fantastic and safe weekend.